Hello, welcome everybody. Wonderful to see us all. Thank you for having me back. We are up to the Iker ha-Shamini. Is that right? The eighth Iker, which is Ani Maamin be'emunah shlema, shezois asher Kol HaTorah HaMetzuah B'Yadeinu Hi Hanasun LaMoshe Rabbeinu Alav Hashalom. That this Torah that is found in our hands now is the Torah which was given to Moshe Rabbeinu. This is the Ikka. This is the foundation of our belief of Torah min Hashemayim. That Torah comes directly from Hashem. And it is not a man-made thing. Just incidentally, before we go on, there's a common question which gets asked, which is that obviously we know Chinese whispers and things change, and how do we know that this is the exact Torah that was given to Moshe Rabbeinu? So I was asked this question when I ran a year 6 lunch and learn in Hartsmere Jewish Primary School. And I said, good, that's a great question. Let's do an experiment over here. And the experiment was we play Chinese whispers, and we played Chinese whispers, and lo and behold, they all failed. And lemon lollipops, whatever it was, became something completely different. And I said, okay, now we're going to play the same game, the exact same game. We're going to play Chinese whispers, but this time your treat, your prize depends on it, because every lunch and learn we'd give them some nice sweets at the end of it. And I said, this time your prize is if one of you messes up, yeah, then no one's going to get the prize, no one's getting the treat. And I said, oh, that's not fair, Rabbi. How can you do that? I said, that's fine. You'll work it out. And they said, well, I mean, we don't want to, mess it up. So like, what can we do? And I said, okay, so let's brainstorm. Let's think about it. And they actually basically worked out exactly a foolproof plan to make sure that they wouldn't mess it up. The first person told it over to the second person, and they said, oh, am I allowed to check back with him to make sure that I heard it right? And I said, yeah, sure, do that. So they did, and they said, go back. And I said, the next person, can I write it down? I said, sure, absolutely, you can write it down, take notes, 100%. And they basically came to the end, and the line that I fed them, at the beginning, which went the whole way through, was, this is how we know the Torah was never changed. This is how we know the Torah was never changed. This is how we know the Torah was never changed. This is how we know the Torah was never changed. And essentially, the point is that if it's something absolutely life-giving and so crucial and so vital to us as a people, to us as a nation, this is our life. This is the essence of who we are and our belief system. It's not something that flippantly, you're going to make mistakes with. It's something you're absolutely going to make sure that you understand, you get down pat, and you get it properly, so that we are able to transmit it from generation to generation without any mistakes and flaws falling in. And you actually see that you can, now they have documented Sifrei Torah, right, from different sides of the universe, from different sides of the world, where which have been separated by by multi generations and centuries and millennia, but essentially it's the same Torah. The Torah is exactly the same Torah, and it hasn't been changed. Okay, now what was being discussed at the end of the second Ikka is an interesting question about how we do find, right, even though despite the fact that there is one Torah, and that one Torah was given to Moshe Rabbeinu, we do see that there is a concept of machlokas. Machlokas is dispute, is debate, is argument. And the question which is discussed is where does that come from? If it's one Torah which was given Torah Mishamayim, comes from Hashem, then how can you have differing opinions? And now we have a very, very detailed analogy. So anyone who's like into business and law and property law and all that will find this very interesting. The rest of us will hopefully also find it interesting. Okay, let's try and get through this analogy nice and quickly. By way of analogy, picture a judge. We're on page 182. By way of analogy, picture a judge deliberating the following case. It's a smaller city somewhere in the American Midwest. Recent growth and opportunities have led to a population surge, prompting the need to revamp the existing roads. One major project proposed by a group of private developers and approved by the municipal authorities would completely overhaul a major roadway and the surrounding neighborhood, creating the infrastructure to support the burgeoning population. One thing stands in the way of this massive project. Although most residents have agreed to sell out and relocate to accommodate the construction, one tenant, there's always that one nudnik, isn't there? One tenant refused to move from her apartment no matter what is offered to her. Her refusal is holding up the demolition of her apartment building and bringing the entire project to a standstill. With no further recourse, the developers invoke eminent dominant domain laws, arranging for the municipality to force a buyout and an eviction for the public good. The tenant challenges this action, and the matter ends up in court. The city's lawyers argue that the tenant has been offered an outlandish sum, more than double the actual value of her apartment. They point out that she spends each winter in sunnier climates, leaving her residency empty many months of the year. Forcing her to move, they argue, will not cause undue hardship, while her eviction will enable massive construction that will bring hundreds of new jobs to other residents in the area. Additionally, the new roadways will ease access to a nearby hospital, potentially saving many lives. Good, so they've got a very strong argument over here. And also, likewise, the tenant's lawyers present a series of counter-arguments. The tenant suffers from medical issues that leave her partially disabled. A forced move they maintain would cause her undue hardship. They demonstrate that the proposed project can be rerouted in a manner that will obviate the need for her eviction. And they argue that the local eminent domain laws apply only to public projects, whereas this project, although designated for the public good, is being implemented by the private sector. Furthermore, permitting private developers to evict residents for their own benefit would set a dangerous precedent in which developers could upend people's lives for any project that they portray as beneficial to the public. Great. What does it sound like? Sounds like we're in court. And it sounds like we've got an argument over here and we've got an argument over there. Then this is the point. Are the arguments all true? Let's assume that they are. After all, the tenant was offered money and the project is in fact important and the woman truly is impaired and there are indeed alternative solutions. There are many facets to this issue and all of them may be valid. This does not mean, however, that all the considerations carry equal weight. In this scenario, the judge will ultimately have to decide upon the correct course of action. His decision will favor one side or the other, but this does not mean he's declaring any of the claims to be false. He's simply weighing all the arguments and deciding which carry the most validity. And this, he explains, is Elu ve'elu. Both sides are expressing genuine truth, as both opinions are based on legitimate interpretations of Torah law. The two sides in a machlokas are not injecting their own opinions. They're discussing and weighing the applicability of different concepts transmitted to us by Moshe Rabbeinu. While the opinions may vary greatly, as long as they are both rooted in Masorah, they are each valid. So we've got over here, this is the concept of Elu ve'elu. Essentially, it's all Divrei Elokim Chaim, the rules and the principles. There's truth to both sides of it. The question is just how we're going to go ahead and dissect it and actually decide the law, decide what the appropriate halacha should be. In fact, throughout Shas, we find that the Gemara will record a dispute between Rav and Shmuel, or Abaye and Rava, or others, and then note that there are a number of scenarios where there was no disagreement. Rava conceded to Abaye in this case, Abaye agreed with Rava in another. This whittles down their disputes to a far more limited range. This essentially is the process we are describing. Both Rava and Abaye were expressing eminent truths. Divergent as their opinions were, both acknowledged that the opinion of the other was in fact credible and valid under certain conditions, meaning they weren't disagreeing with the essential truth, the concept, the rule that was being expressed. They were just saying that in this situation, we're not going to apply that rule because there's something else, another dominant factor that we're going to have to pay more attention to. We're giving more weight to a different factor. The debate related to the exact line of demarcation. Until what point is this angle more compelling? Beyond which point would the other's opinion prevail? A halachic ruling is the result of a qualified Torah scholar who has knowledge and who studied under earlier authorities who transmitted him the rules of how to determine the halacha, weighing all the legitimate angles, assessing which carries the most value in a specific circumstance, and giving that opinion the final imprimatur whatever that means, upon which we are to act. In every case of a halakhic ruling, a true and binding assessment has been made. No individual can ever use the concept of elu ve'elu to justify charting his own path in defiance of a ruled upon halacha. So elu ve'elu, a person can't come along and say, there you are, elu ve'elu. I'm pulling out my elu ve'elu card over there. It has to be based on a legitimate principle, a legitimate idea, and then there's just a discussion, and the question is how that's applied. The concept, which probably I'm assuming earlier on was discussed, is that Chazal say, it says in the Gemara that there are shivim panim la Torah. There are 70 faces of the Torah. And this is the concept that a person can interpret, have a different understanding or a different approach to understanding the Torah based on their perspective, right? This is my perspective, and this is your perspective. And as an analogy that I've heard given to that is, we can both be sitting around, we can all be sitting around a different table, right? And there'll be an item plonked right in the middle, right? But where I'm sitting and I look at it from this angle, you're sitting over there and you see it from a completely different angle. So we're both looking at the same thing, but depending on what's called the face, or that sort of elevation, the facet, the direction you're looking from, you'll actually potentially see a completely different object depending on the angle that you're looking from. So too, each of us have our own Shoresh HaNeshama, which means that our neshama is rooted in a certain direction, and therefore our perspective of how we approach or understand a concept in Torah is going to be different based on that perspective, and that is what is going to give way to this concept of elu ve'elu. Essentially, it's all true. It just is going to be affected and may change depending on the angle that your perspective. The question we all want to know: how does this affect my daily life? I see nodding over there. When we encounter a halachic question, we turn to the Torah and our rabbanim for guidance. We should. At times, the answers may not be clear-cut. Often we are told that the matter is subject to machlokas. Some rule leniently, others are stringent. Yeah, we have this, right? There in many areas of halacha, it's right. This is the bottom line halacha, and it can be stricter than that, and you can be more lenient than that. But there are different levels on the communal level as well. Divergent halachic approaches abound, leading to significant divisions between various factions of frum Jewry, construction of a mikveh, wearing tefillin on Chol Hamoed, building an eruv in a major urban area. These are but a few topics that are subject to marked dispute. The rift is further magnified by contemporary issues or innovations that require a halachically valid response. Does government supervision render milk kosher? Is human genetic engineering permitted? One Rav rules this way, another Rav says that way. Some communities follow this opinion, others take a drastically different approach. So much divide, so much disagreement. And yet, these passionate debates reveal the beautiful facets of HaKadosh Baruch Hu's diamond. These are the diamonds, right? With the facets and the different perspectives. That's actually a good analogy, right? There's so many different facets of the diamond. With the guidelines transmitted through the ages, we are all doing our utmost to discern HaKadosh Baruch Hu's will. Bottom line, we're looking for the MS. We want to know the right thing to do. What is the truth? There are many angles and many approaches, as unfortunately, we lack the authoritative body of Sanhedrin to issue an unequivocal ruling. Yes, the lack of clarity is distressing, but the full-throated, legitimate, spirited debate it spawns is something of beauty, because doing the will of Hashem matters to us. We won't settle for anything less. If people attempt to justify entrenched dubious practices or to find sources in the Torah to validate in vogue moral standards, we pay them no regard. But essentially, what is being said over here is I think, I mean, this is a beautiful spin on what unfortunately we see that these machloikases, these disputes, can often lead to breakdowns in communities, and they can, machloikas can spill out onto the street, and into the regular Belinda, Mike, Lucille, Ruth, and Joshua and Mrs. Gerards of the right. So, and that's a real problem. That's a real problem. But it's the way essentially to combat that, as he's saying over here, is actually to realize that this is just a different facet and just a different angle of that beautiful diamond. Um, and that full-throated, legitimate, spirited debate is actually beautiful because we're enhancing Torah. We're understanding Torah. We're able to see so many different facets and be able to understand and appreciate the diamond through that. Let's just begin with the ninth Ikar over here, which you'll continue next week. So the ninth Ikar. Ani Maamin be'emunah shlema shezois haTorah lo yisehei muchlefes. I believe with emunah shalema that this Torah lo yisehei muchlefes will never be switched, will never be exchanged. V'lo yisehei Torah acheres, and there will never be another Torah. I don't know if you heard my kids there. Um, so here we go. V'lo yisehei Torah acheres me'ezeh baris b'Hashem. Guys, just give me a share. Please move the door. Thank you. And there will not be another Torah. There will never be another Torah. The Torah will not be exchanged. Will not be replaced. I think this is a really powerful idea and powerful concept that actually, I mean, it goes very much hand in hand with the previous Ikka that we had, that it comes mishamayim, it comes from Hashem, right? And therefore it can never be changed. And I think there's a temptation to be able to sort of apply and think that perhaps the Torah can adapt and can change and can modernize and sort of go with the times, and we have to go with the times. But really, essentially, the Torah is this beautiful guidebook, and as we call it, Torah's Chaim, an instruction manual for life. And it's as applicable and as relevant now today as it ever was. It's just what it requires of us is to be able to look for that relevance, to be able to open our eyes, to be able to approach the Torah with that open-minded attitude, and then we'll be able to see that actually that Torah is incredibly relevant to all of us in our lives. Okay, thank you very much.